This episode of UDSP is brought to you by Shutterstock. For 25% off your new account, head on over to Shutterstock.com, and when you guys check out, make sure to use the offer code Gamebreaker10.
Gamebreaker TV.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppet, the WildStar Show. This is episode 19, and it is October 1st. I apologize, I got the wrong music playing. I realized as soon as I hit play, I was like, wait a second, this isn't the right music. So I'll find a place to put it in the show for you guys so you guys can get your mariachi, mariba, I don't know, fix. But it'll be in there, I promise you guys. Coming up today, Carbine continues to add more into their combat system. We talk talent trees and ability upgrades, as well as a community manager teases some beta news, all that and more. But first, you guys know him and love him from right here on Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppets, Mr. Farhan Siddiqui.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. How's it going, sir?
This cool. Can you drop the lower third?
Oh, yep.
Yep. Yeah, I got this cool Kraken pin. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Dominion. Right here. Right here. Thank you, Onrest. Pin. Facts. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, you ready to get into it? You ready to talk some UDSP? We don't have Mark today, unfortunately. And obviously, as you guys can tell, I'm not Gary. Gary decided to go off to Europe. So you got me this week. Gary should be back next week, unless something very tragic happens, like he stays in a hostel and really bad things happen. But I'm not wishing that on him. I'm just saying, Europe's a scary place, Gary. I don't know why you went there, but be careful. All right, let's go ahead and let's just take a look at what's up with WildStar this week. Carbine revealed what makes their combat so special this week, and it comes down to ability mechanics. Now, first of all, Farhan, I think we kind of already knew a little bit about this. The vast majority of you know, cast times and channel abilities, stuff like that we've seen in WildStar and we're kind of used to by now. I think for that being said, those specific elements, and actually the fact that all of these elements, the channeling ability, the casting, these can all be cast on the run, which is a really big thing. But I think that's kind of pivotal here for a game like WildStar that's so action focused. You can't really be in the situation where you're stuck to the ground. Otherwise, you're going to cause a slowdown in the pace.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on. So between you having to react to enemy telegraphs, you having your own telegraphs, maybe allied telegraphs like heals that you need to get into, you know, just sort of rooting you down in place for like a majority of cast time abilities would really damper like the pace of combat. So what they're definitely doing is they are, you know, going ahead and trying to make it so that you can, you know, react, you can do a lot of things, and it's not just the fact that you can cast while moving. It's a number of these mechanics are actually put in place to let you, you know, get around the fact that you might have to interrupt yourself. Otherwise, in another game, you know, your damage is going to suffer significantly because of mechanics like this. But, you know, because they're so prevalent in all aspects of the combat, they've completely designed the system to, you know, let you take advantage of that.
So let's talk about some of these systems, because they are doing some, I don't want to say revolutionary things. It's not like we haven't heard of this type of gameplay in games somewhere, but we haven't really seen them in MMOs before. So it's kind of interesting. Let's take a look at some of these. The first example was the rapid tap mechanic. Now, how exactly is the rapid tap mechanic going to translate into gameplay?
So the idea of rapid tap is that when you initiate these kinds of abilities, then basically you have a limited amount of time to just continually use that ability and get like more uses out of it. So think, you know, I hate to just make a lot of WoW comparisons, but you know, this is like a game that I have in my mind. Like, let's say that you were a mage and you were going to cast something like arcane missiles and you're going to shoot out a bunch of missiles. Instead of just clicking the button and just waiting and letting it cast or something, you're going to actually feel like you're shooting out each of those missiles as it goes out. And I think that this has a lot of potential because it's sort of like it's a channel ability, except something if you can distract your enemy, or you can do something that would otherwise mess with their ability to just keep initiating that ability over and over. Maybe some sort of debuff that slows down their ability to initiate combat. So like something that slows down their global or something like that, or any kind of effect like that suddenly becomes a lot more magnified because this ability itself will actually happen slower. So yeah, combo breaker. Good example from chat.
Can can I just predict now that I'm going to be seeing a lot of people complaining about broken keyboards from the rapid tap? Because I can just see, I'm one of those people that knows for a fact, A, there's a global cooldown. B, there's, in WoW, you brought it up, I play a Feral Druid and I have energy regeneration. I don't care. I'm still one of those players. And unless I'm really focusing on my rotation, I'm one of those people who just sits there and hits the button so that as soon as I get the energy, that it goes off.
Yeah.
So
I tended to do that a lot too before I got one of the like multi-button mouses.
But now, they're basically instigating a mechanic that I don't want to say caters, but it encourages that, because the more you can hit your ability in a shorter amount of time, potentially the more attacks you can get off. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I might come across condescending. I think it's really fun. But I can just tell, like, I already feel like I'm breaking my keyboard enough as it is. I can't imagine. I can just see people, like, just going crazy with it, trying to get off as many attacks as possible.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a concern. I think one of the things that they could hopefully will do is that they don't make this, like, one of your primary abilities. Like hopefully this isn't a filler attack that you're just, so that every time you have a filler, you just start mashing this button or something. Like, hopefully it's something that is, like, powerful, and so you feel like, okay, I'm getting a lot of use out of it, but you're only using it every so often or something. Otherwise, yeah, I think they could pretty quickly fall into like, oh, I'm just mashing one over and over and over and over. So yeah.
I mean, the idea of maybe kind of like you said, all right, so let's say I'm a roguish type character where I stun and I've created this opportunity for myself. Now it's all about getting up as much damage as I can. That's the moment for me to hit my ability where I can tap as much as I can, because they're immobilized and this is my damage opportunity. I think that kind of gameplay will really strike it home for the console player, for the God of War button masher that's really used to just mashing A or B as fast as possible, trying to get up as much damage as possible, and maybe bridge that gap a little bit easier for that type of player.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, using the example that they gave, like, so they had a stalker who is doing like an attack where they mash it and they just keep stabbing really, really quickly. For a console player, someone who is used to kind of beat 'em up or something like that, then that feels pretty visceral. And if it is something like that where, okay, it's a melee range attack, maybe it would be hard to get a lot of those attacks to land if your enemy was moving around. I'm thinking of PvP now, but, just in general, maybe if like a PvE mob was moving as well, then it could be true. That is a situation where you feel like, okay, I'm going to stun first, and then I can consistently feel like I'm actually landing those attacks when I'm mashing it. So,
what is this going to do? Chat room's bringing this up, and this is a really good point. There's software out there that can do programmable macros, that can obviously program an amount of clicks faster than you actually have the ability to even think. So, and obviously you can program that to a button or a piece on your mouse. You can program that to a simple click. Do you think that they're going to kind of innately put in a cooldown? Like it's an ability that you can activate once every 3 minutes, but every 3 minutes you can activate it, and for the next 10 seconds, every second you can get an attack off. Do you think that they'll kind of try and create this inner programming to it to avoid the macro software type issue?
Yeah, I definitely think just very similar to in the crowd control dev speak where they talked about, okay, you mash F to get out of a stun or something. They said themselves that they're going to have systems in place such that they can limit the number of times that your F registers, so that someone who is macroing it doesn't just instantly get out of the stun without any effort at all, or has a really significant advantage over somebody who's just mashing it, normally. So I think that they would do the same thing here, where they would just limit the rate at which it's coming in. I do hope, though, that just for the sake of the people who feel like, okay, I don't like mashing on buttons, and they're just tuned out to the idea, we already know, at least from one of the mechanics that we're going to talk about in a minute, that they're giving options, so different ways to activate these abilities. So I think something like making this into a press and hold kind of thing, like they already have other press and hold abilities, but making it just work the same way where you can just hold it down and it'll work as fast as possible. I think that would be a good option to give to players so that they don't feel like they have to macro it.
That's potential. We'll get in probably a little bit more into that in just a second, but the next one that we have actually up here that we wanted to talk about were a mechanic that had kind of like charges, but not the charge and release one. That one obviously is coming later, but so charges it sounds new. I haven't really heard of, I think charge, and all I can think of is like charging at the enemy, which is clearly not the type of mechanic of how an ability works. So how does what is this charge mechanic?
Right. So there's a lot of definitions under the word charge that they're pulling in, and it's a little unfortunate that they have to with the same word. But anyway, so this is like the idea of, imagine you have an ability, like, let's say as an Esper, I have a bunch of swords come up behind me. Like I have an ability that I push, and then it'll summon a bunch of psychic swords that'll flip behind me or something. And I'm making up this ability. I don't know if it's in the game or whatever, but it seems like it would fit. And so when I have those things up there, then maybe when I push a button, then if I have 3 swords out there, it'll shoot one of the swords forward and hit everything that's in front of me. And so I have 3 charges by activating this ability, and but I don't have like a timer the same way that I had with the tap and keep tapping kind of thing. I can take my own pace and shoot those swords out or whatever. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something visual. I think it'd be cool if most of the fact that you could visually see how many charges the other person has. But if it could be something else where it's like, okay, similarly, like the dodge mechanic has charges. You have 2 charges of dodge, and you can dash out of the way once, and then you can dash away again immediately afterward if you really want to get out of the way, or you could just conserve that second dash for a later time. So there's a lot of potential for that. Basically you have the option: do I want to keep all these charges and use them all at once, or do I want to pace myself?
What about the potential of like charging up a spell to create a nuke? One big ability that you hold for 5 seconds, and if you hold for 5, it does 10,000 damage, or if you hold for 2 seconds, it does 2,000. Do we think that we're seeing any kind of those type of charge abilities?
Yeah, that's the next one that they showed in the dev speak, which is essentially an ability, and they talked about this a little bit in a few of the interviews to give a lot more clear exactly how it'll work. So imagine you're playing as a range caster, and you have like an ability that actually does root you, so you can't move, because there are some abilities that you're not going to be able to move while casting. They're balanced around the fact that you might not be able to. And so if it's like a long cast, like you're saying, like 5 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever it is, and a telegraph shows up on top of you from your enemy, then okay, I want to get out of that, but do I just interrupt my channel and then I feel like, oh, I just wasted 3 seconds out of my 4-second timer, but I had to get out, otherwise I was going to die, and then my raid leader would yell at me, kind of thing. So what they have in WildStar is the ability for some of the abilities that have like a cast time like that to have little dots on their cast bar. And so they're basically little tiers. So essentially, like, okay, if I channel this spell for 1 second, then it's this strong. If I go for 2 seconds, then it gets stronger. In 3 seconds, it's stronger, and so forth, until you get to the maximum, at which point you can release it for the full strength of the ability. And so I think that's pretty cool. Again, this is something that I think is pretty different from what I've seen in other MMOs. Maybe another MMO's done something like this, but I'm not aware of it. And it definitely fits in really well with the whole telegraph system and having to react and having to just say, okay, well, maybe I didn't get the full amount of damage out of that spell, but I didn't waste my time casting that for however long that I was casting.
And what we just talked about here, they're actually, just to clarify, they're 2 different systems. There's the charges, which is kind of like where you were talking about, where it was a quantity of like, boom, I get 5, and I can either shoot them all at once or shoot them one at a time. But then there's also the second one, which is more of like a charging, but it's kind of like a charge and release. You sit there, you hold it, you build up a large amount of power, and then you shoot it out of whatever you're going to be doing. So that's actually 3 mechanics right there. So we've covered the rapid tap, we've covered charges, and we've covered charge and release. But of course, they could easily add more into the obviously the charge and release type mechanic. You know, for example, you kind of talked about spells, or maybe specifically, let's look at like an ice spell. Quick cast is something, you know, if I was going to be charging a icicle or a frost type spell, if I was to just quickly hold it, another way that it could work is a fast tap slows them. Whereas if I hit the maximum amount of time to charge, it'll freeze them in place, which I think is really kind of fun. It opens up a very interesting and dynamic way to play. Not only, you know, in that situation of slowing them or freezing them, it really doesn't even come down to the fact of freezing them is always the best option. It might be in that specific example, but it really opens itself up to that style where you have an option of doing one or the other. With one spell, it opens you up to a lot of choice of how you want to approach to attack, which I think adds a lot of dynamicness to the gameplay.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of depth with something like that, because what you can have is essentially like each tier of that ability doesn't necessarily have to just be more damage than the last tier. You know, they can have different cooldowns based on how long you channel it. They could have different effects, like you said, like maybe you could snare them versus rooting them, or, you know, all kinds of different things, you know, however deep they want it to get, like however, you know, kind of options. It essentially, what it does is it gives you 4 abilities all in one button, but you got to choose how much of that based on how long you charge, and then there's some sort of shared cooldown between. You have to have a choice, like, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? I think that there's definitely a lot of potential for them to have a lot of depth with abilities like that.
So the final mechanic here that came out was the press and hold. So we have press and release, charges, rapid tap, press and hold. And I think this is much more along the lines for people who've played other games. It's like a channeled ability. And I think I like the direction of this. I don't know. I don't want to say, I've talked about how I think we as gamers wouldn't like the idea of a virtual reality MMO because we don't want to necessarily do the work that it would require to hike up a mountain. But this is a little bit more immersive, yet low key enough. So it's like, okay, we're channeling an ability. For me to do that, I'm going to press and I'm going to hold it. So that way, when I'm done channeling, I just basically lift up and release. It's kind of like it's almost pressure sensitive. You're activating it by holding it. And I think it gives you this more innate feeling of you're controlling your character's movements, not just pressing a button to activate something.
Yeah, so I think that this kind of ability is probably the least unique out of them. It just feels special when you're doing it. So it's essentially just a channel ability, right? The fact that you can move while you're channeling isn't something that's innately separate, right? Like, there's plenty of games that have channel abilities that you can move while you're doing it. But the fact is just the way that it feels. So when you are pressing and holding it, you feel like, okay, you're a little bit more connected. And I know that this one specifically, so the example that they showed in the Destiny, at least one of them, was I think a warrior like doing this little whirlwindy thing. And so they're spinning around, they're going forward and just slashing everything. And I remember from I think PAX, I could be wrong, it might be San Diego Comic-Con, one of the conventions recently, some people got some hands-on time and were playing with a warrior, and I don't remember where the post came from, but somebody was talking about that ability specifically being really annoying for them, because they felt like, okay, I'm like sort of doing finger gymnastics, trying to move around with WASD while, you know, hitting like 5 or whatever, because, I mean, obviously they couldn't change keybind, so it was a little bit unfortunate in a convention circumstance, but it was a little hard for him basically to hold down the thing and then keep moving while doing that. And you know, in response to that kind of feedback, what Carbine said, you know, even just most recently, Scooter on Reddit basically posted in a comments that, you know, there'll be an option that for these press and hold abilities, because it could be a little bit annoying or hard depending on what your setup is to actually pull that off. You'll have the option of like in the options tab, you'll be able to select like, okay, I want this ability to actually, instead of having to press and hold, I press it to start it, and then I press it again to like essentially release, kind of thing. So it just makes it. I think the fact that Carbine is actually showing the initiative to actually go in and give players options, because like this is the kind of thing that happens a lot, that there's this disconnect between players and developers where the players are always like, okay, well, I prefer this, I prefer this, I prefer this. You know, everyone has their own different preference, and so usually the developers just have to pick one thing that they're going to go with, right? They pick, okay, this is what we're going to go with, and then we don't really provide those other options because we think that trying to one maintain all of those things, make sure they're all like working well and everything is it's a lot of added work rather than just picking the one that they feel fits their vision the best. Um, but what Carbine's doing essentially is that they're saying like, no, this is something that we feel like, okay, this feedback is valid. We recognize that it could be a problem, and we're going to go ahead and provide another option. So this is what I was referencing when I meant that maybe they could put in something that you can press and hold to do the rapid tap or something like that, or something like that, instead of having to necessarily keep tapping that on that one. So, yeah.
Now, I mean, a lot of mechanics that we've kind of mentioned here, I think we've seen, as we've talked about in other games. It's not that these are unique concepts, but what is unique is seeing these translate over to MMOs. And I think that the thing is WildStar's combat has always felt really interesting and fun, and I think that's what's going to make these additional features that they're bringing to the MMO genre are going to make it an even more interesting level of gameplay for WildStar.
Yeah, and I think overall, I think that the feedback that I've seen for this dev speak has been pretty positive. But I have seen a few comments along the lines of like, okay, well, it's like you were saying, it's really not all that different from what other games are doing. And to their credit, for the most part, they're not. Like, right, press and hold isn't really that different from other channels. If basically, it's just giving you a more in-game way of canceling your channel rather than just having to hit escape or whatever. But where it does depart from where other games are doing is just how the game feels when you're actually playing it. So, and this is a real challenge in game design. Like, how do you keep two classes balanced with one another while still making them feel like they actually play differently? And like, how do you put into the game, like, what is the difference between a shadow bolt and a fireball in the game? They just look different, and okay, maybe like one's a little bit shorter of a cast time, one's that thing. And for the most part, like what other games have been doing is that they try to add like procs and other things and try to add in complexity with synergies, and I mean that's all really cool and all, but the point is that wherever you start adding in more complexity with procs and other synergies and that kind of thing, then that messes with the balance again. And so, but another way that they can approach trying to make the classes actually feel different is just make it so that the way that you're the buttons that you're pushing, like if you were to, instead of looking at the screen, look at how the player is hitting keys on their keyboard. One class might actually look very different from another one just because it plays differently. And so that plays into, letting players sort of pick their own play style based on class. Or maybe even, all the way down to the action bars. Like, I don't actually like having to do press and hold maybe. So maybe I just won't have to equip those abilities. I don't know. I mean, that sort of depends on balance and tuning of abilities. And so, maybe max DPS, I have to just deal with that. But maybe I could pick a different class that doesn't have those kinds of mechanics as often and be all right. So I think that there's a lot of potential with adding these kinds of mechanics that's maybe a little bit beyond just a little bit of flavor.
So last week we actually talked a little bit about the facepalm worthy reveal of the final two classes last week, but at the end of this video we kind of got a little bit of a special look at them. So there they are in all their glory. Well, here, let me scroll down a little bit. Here they are, boom, boom, in all their glory.
Gotta go down a bit for the Chua.
Yeah, a little bit short. That lower third was cutting him off. We'll go down there. So here they are, and they were kind of teased even a little bit more. They teased that we would be hearing more about these classes soon, didn't they?
Yeah, they said that, okay, in the next few weeks we'll be getting some sort of information about these classes. And, they're just following through with what they've been doing. And I think WildStar fans actually had, like, a recent article where they were showing, like, throughout a lot of different places, we've been seeing these classes just propping up in the background of, like, this video or this, picture or otherwise. They've just been sticking these little Easter eggs all over the place. So you can see, whenever you see somebody with these defibrillators or with, like, the big rifle, then, okay, this is that class that's in there. and it's just like a nice way of getting the people to get a little bit excited, just to like, oh, I saw it, a little bit of fun, just trying to hunt them down and sad about everything.
So then, just as a side note, I mean, obviously you brought up the fact that the medics has their defibrillator, gun, dual wield, whatever these end up being, and then obviously the big gun. So there's your silhouette of what you get for playing that class. But do we know what's going on here? This kind of looks somewhat like a throne room. Is there something big that's going on? I mean, we got big guard. Well, that one's off screen. We got a big guard over here. It kind of looks like a big throne. What's going on here? Do we have any context?
I don't think we have much of the way in context, but what we do know is that, okay, so we have so it's a throne room, but there's like sort of plants going on in the background, so maybe it's some sort of outdoor environment. This could be like a dungeon or a raid or something. You've got guards wearing these weird like tiki mask kind of things with these big swords. So yeah, I don't think it really fits the look of I mean, these are clearly Dominion races, but I don't think it fits the look of the Dominion necessarily. But it could be something like along the lines of like some sort of encounter or something. So
definitely worth checking out. Let's move on and take a look at an interview that Zam did. But before we do, I want to tell you guys about a sponsor that helps make this show possible. And guys, I cannot tell you enough. We talk about Shutterstock, we talk about graphics, and everything that we do here at Gamebreaker. Everything you do on the internet today revolves around utilizing graphics and really trying to take your project to the next level so that you can be better than the other people that are putting stuff on YouTube. I promise you, if you guys are out there making YouTube videos, the best way to increase the production value and the look of your project is by using assets that you can find over on Shutterstock.com. They've got so much. A lot of you guys, know that I make a Waypoint. It's a weekly recap, and we do 3 of them. One for Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, and League of Legends. And it's a green screen show. Obviously, just like here, let me bring this up. This is a better view. It's a green screen show. We shoot on a green screen. That's essentially what it looks like right there. I'm standing against a green wall. And what we do is obviously we go into post after we're done shooting, and we key that out. And Shutterstock has so many great backgrounds for you to choose from. I mean, I'm not shooting an in-sync video, but I mean, if I was, boom, there I go. It's like I'm shooting an in-sync or Backstreet Boys music video. But they've also got, they've got a bunch of other like kind of studio sets. They've got nice like wall paintings, clean, very, very nice looking sets. And then if we scroll up even just a little bit higher, we can get a little bit grungier if we want. They got a whole bunch of different textures. I'm sure you can find this one on Shutterstock without that lamp as well. But they've just got so much, and this is such a great place to go when you're looking for something. Or you even got this set here. They've even kind of created it where you can, maybe put something in the iMac that's in the background of the screen. It's options, and that's what Shutterstock is so good at. It's great at giving you options. So if you guys head on over to Shutterstock and you're about to check out, if you guys use the offer code Gamebreaker10, you'll receive 25% off your new account. So head on over, Shutterstock.com, offer code Gamebreaker10, 25% off. Let's move on to WildStar information. This is coming out of Zam now, and they had some really interesting quotes from Carbine's Chris Lynch and Hugh Shelton. So definitely worth checking out, but we pulled a few of the highlights to talk about here. First of all, a little bit of tidbits into the medic is... Now, this is actually really interesting, Farhan, is the fact that... Oh, I messed with the camera over here. The medic will have almost no targeted spells for the healing side of things.
Yep.
That's really hard to imagine a healer that doesn't target their or their ally to keep them alive. Especially when we were talking about the medic kind of potentially being this pure healing class, I think just last episode.
So yeah, it definitely sounds like something where maybe this is what they meant by like, okay, so our main healer, maybe they mean like main WildStar field healer. Like it's all freeform targeting. You really got this feeling of, okay, I'm in full, well, maybe not even full control, because like maybe clicking feels a little bit more control, but you feel like you're actually aiming everything. Like it's up to your skill to actually get those players to actually, get their healing done. And I do think it's a little bit worrisome, just because some of the healing, like I can't imagine it like in a 40-man raid. Like I mean, basically, it's a situation where one healer isn't going to be able to necessarily pick the targeted heals. And so will that healer actually end up feeling weaker in the long run just because of the fact that it's going to be harder for them to actually do it? I mean, I don't know, but I definitely feel like this is something that I would want to actually try because when I play MMOs, I try to play in the healing roles. So I think that this is going to be my calling. I'm going to try to actually pull it through. Definitely go in with these targeted heals and see if it actually works out. And I think if it does, then you're going to feel a lot more satisfied. You're going to feel like, okay, I definitely earned, my credit. I wasn't just, doing whack-a-mole with health bars necessarily. I was doing, aiming down and like, defibrillating them or whatever.
From a balance perspective here, it's obviously a lot more difficult to land freeform heals than just you. You have to know where they're at. You have to think of where they're going to be. You have to play a little bit more proactively here. Do you think to compensate for the difficulty in this, they're going to adjust it to heal for more than, say, the other classes that are simply able to just target?
Yeah. I think that they would have to, right? Because if you're going to have, so basically you'd have to balance it around, okay, maybe this healing spell is 10% stronger, but you're only going to land it 90% of the time or something like that. So, they're going to have some sort of metric in there because they have to account for the fact that sometimes those heals aren't actually going to work out. If it's like a telegraph that leaves an area on the ground that, the person has to stand in for a while to get healed, then yeah, okay, maybe that kind of thing, they can just balance around it. I do think that it doesn't necessarily mean that the other healing classes are going to be weaker if they have, like targeted options. Again, it's an option. You have a limited action set. You're going to want to pick them. If freeform heals end up just being like outclassing targeted heals for whatever reason, the other classes are going to be able to just choose those ones and bring them in. The thing that worried me about the medic then was that, okay, what if it goes the other way though? What if it doesn't quite swing that way where freeform heals are like better? And this is probably something that'll be on an encounter basis, or what kind of tank you have, or other kinds of factors that'll play into it. And so just based on that, not having the option of having those targeted heals sometimes might be a little bit shaky for me. But I mean, we'll have to see.
Now, here's something else that's a little bit interesting is the fact that they went on to kind of talk about how spell slingers are actually going to be more focused of direct healing, and espers are going to be focused more on healing over time. So they're definitely building, and we'll get into, actually, this isn't just happening to the healers, this is happening with almost all of the classes. They're keeping the classes distinct in their roles. And this is something that we kind of have seen the opposite of as the MMO trend has continued. And it's interesting to think of the difference here. But looking at this, looking at the types of healing that we have, healing over time and direct healing, those are really the two standard that we see across the board. But that makes me think that, the only other type of healing or mitigation that a healer can do is absorption and shields. Maybe AoE healing, because HOTS don't necessarily count as AoE. They're just more ticking on one specific person. Now, obviously, you're healing multiple people at a time with them, but do you think that they're just going to be a very diverse, shielded AoE healer? That would make a lot more sense based on the fact that they aren't focused on targeting one person. They're targeting an area, or they're shielding a whole group, thus preventing the damage.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, that if you have a class that is actually really focused on freeform targeting for your heals, then those heals are probably going to have to be in some way area effect, right? It doesn't, like, okay, for a damaging perspective, maybe you could pull off a thing where you have a, like a telegraph, let's say like a long line telegraph, and maybe it only damages the first enemy that it hits in that telegraph, but at least you got to see, okay, it'll hit something along this line, but whatever it hits first, that's what'll take the damage. But from a healing perspective, like, that would be really, really frustrating, right? Like, oh, somebody else walked in front of my heal, so it didn't quite work, even though it's a telegraphed heal. That would just, that would make me angry. So even less reason to heal the DPS, right? That are walking.
Right.
So
DPS would just start sniping heals. It's like you got a heal beam, and they'd be like, no, it's mine. I'm gonna stand in front of the tank because I need the heal.
yeah, so I think it would just feel better if they were AoE heals, but then does that mean that they're sort of lacking in a single target heal versus other heals? As far as like absorbs and other things go, I think that it does make sense for them to actually keep the feel of the three different healing classes pretty differently and so forth for the tanking. Just because basically, when you only have 6 classes, it's not as hard to have some distinction. You don't have to worry as much about homogenization while still having each class have the tools that they need to actually pull off encounters and do stuff. Also, I mean, if they're actually, if their end game balancing is 40-man rating, you don't have to worry quite as much about, having one class be way better at one thing than another class, being a little bit weaker in that thing. So, no.
A wild Mark Taylor appears. Continue though, Faran. Continue.
So basically, with 40-man, you don't have to worry quite as much about espers are really good at hot healing or AoE healing or whatever, and spell slingers are better at single target healing because you would actually have multiple of each of those inside of your raid, which is something that we don't see quite as much in MMOs that have smaller groups because they have to actually make sure because you might not have an like a whatever healer if you only have 10 people in your group, so they actually have to make sure that everything is a little bit more homogenized.
I totally. I realized I swapped my camera of the B-roll for Mark's camera, and that's why it suddenly popped on Mark. I gotta get one. I gotta get this 4-shot here or this 3-shot setup. But on the topic of tanking, warriors are obviously very mitigation focused, which makes a lot of sense. But on the reverse side, stalkers are very evasion focused. So. We'll start with you, Faran. What do you think of this? I mean, obviously, it's going to be pretty clear. Healers and multiple groups, especially like the 40-mans, are not going to really probably want to deal with the evasion tanks because they're nice, but when that hit goes off on an evasion tank, every healer wants to kill himself because it's just so much more stressful.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly starting your heal and then canceling it and starting it and then canceling it. Like, oh, do they need the heal? Do they need heal? And then like they finally get hit right when you're starting a heal, so then your heal is gonna land in time. It's just so frustrating when there's an evasion tank. But again, 40-man raids, maybe you have your evasion tank on something where it makes more sense, and you have your mitigation tank dealing with the person that would otherwise have spiky damage. So maybe if the stalker ends up being really good at holding a lot of ads or something like that, then okay, so you're avoiding 5 out of 10 ads. Then it still feels like pretty consistent damage, and healers can deal with that. Whereas you put the warrior on, the other thing, or who knows how the engineer is going to tank. So, I think it can work, but it's just a little bit worrisome. I hope that they don't go too far into that. On the other hand, one thing that I was thinking is that, this came up just because I was remembering they had one of those demos of the Storm Talon's lair, and they were talking about like, okay, so this tank versus that tank. And basically, with healing, they were saying that maybe the warrior could just stand in the red, basically, and soak that damage, and then it'd be a little bit easier to heal, whereas a stalker would avoid it. So at that point, it's not really like, okay, you have like unpredictable avoidance, like, oh, you're just waiting for that dice roll, like, did I dodge, did I parry, or whatever. It's actually more like he has more ability to actually dodge out of the way with the dodge button. Kind of thing. And in that case, like, okay, the healer can actually deal with that, right? You can visually see on your screen, are they getting hit by damage or are they not getting hit by damage, or you can talk out over vent or however else. And in that case, it might not actually be as bad. If it's avoidance from a different spin, like it's controllable avoidance rather than it being like unpredictable, just dice roll avoidance.
Mark, what do you think on the topic?
So I hope I'm not oversimplifying it, and sorry for being late. Thanks, government shutdown. Woo, rock! And then I left my phone at home, so I couldn't tell anybody. But so here's what I think relative to the point that I caught up on. It sounds to me like the stalker might be like an off tank, or and maybe the clearer or the person who picks up all of the ads and stuff like that, and maybe swap aggro back and forth. And depending on how they make the game, that'll be something that can be easily managed. Because a lot of games, I have known, I've noticed as of late, they've not necessarily given the tanks enough different types of threat generators or taunts, if you will. So if you have to do a Romeo and Juliet kind of boss, or you got to do different things where you have to, basically main tank, off tank, and you switch the aggro, that can be kind of a nightmare, quite frankly. In terms of healing, it seems to me, at face value, what I know right now, that the single, I guess, target healer, which was, I believe, the spell slinger. Am I getting that part right?
Yeah.
That seems to be the person that would focus on trying to heal the tank, whereas the AoE healers will be focusing on trying to heal the group, if you will. That tends to be the way we've done it in a lot of MMOs in the past. So I'm assuming what I know that will continue to be the case. And then maybe what they'll do is they'll throw because there's no like real single target, I guess, towards their own players. So they'll probably drop a heal like right near an AoE heal near where the main tank is, and then after that, focus and basically cycle back and forth on the group. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of stacks or layers with the 40-man group, or raid or PvP. But that's what I think, or that's what I would expect to see, and I would expect to see the spell slinger probably be closer to the boss, even though it's a ranged class, maybe like midway, and then they would basically be laying single target heals, and then when they're not, then basically kind of pivoting and shooting the boss. So I hope that wasn't redundant, but that's kind of the way I would see the tea leaves, right?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think especially if the spell slinger, so if they said that what the spell slinger has is like a lot of directed line kind of thing, maybe they could have something where, and this isn't something that we've really talked about as much, but maybe they could have healing spells that are sort of like it's a targeted damage spell. So your freeform targeting is actually like you're aiming to hurt someone, but then it has like some sort of a smart healing component to it. So based on how much damage you do, it automatically heals around there or something like that. And so that could be something that they could do to actually have freeform targeting feel a little bit more like it still feels like, okay, I'm aiming something and I'm doing something with that system instead of having a target, whereas you're still having like some sort of effective healing without having to worry about, okay, like they ran out of my heal kind of thing.
Are you talking kind of like a multi-purpose AoE? So, for example, I remember, of course, I can't remember all the different colors and their purposes off the top of my head right now. It's like a rainbow, but maybe they put in a cool world. You drop what would be a heal in an AoE area for your friendlies, but then if the bad guys go in there, they get hurt from it. That would be kind of interesting, right?
So yeah, and maybe that would work. It'd be a little bit hurt on the eyes in terms of which color telegraph do you put down on the ground. Is it red or is it orange or whatever?
It's pulsing. I can't tell.
Striped, right? Polka dots, whatever they want to do. But what I was thinking would be something like more like, okay, maybe the spell slinger has a shot that like it explodes on enemy targets and then it heals around whatever enemy targets. So you actually have to aim it at an enemy, but then it would be good for healing melee or something like that. So it's like it shoots something and then it explodes and then it doesn't. I don't know. It's just off the top of my head, but it's something that they could do where they have the freeform targeting part, the part that's up to the skill of the player is like that fighting. So you feel like you're trying to aim, you're trying to hit your enemy, which I think feels a lot better than like, okay, did I miss the enemy? That's a little bit more acceptable than I missed my ally. Then you get mad at your friend, right? You don't want to make players get mad at their friends. You want to make them get mad at the enemy. So if the enemy dodges the attack, then it's like, oh darn, I should have hit it. But if you hit the enemy and then it does a smart heal that you don't have to worry quite as much about, that okay, it actually did the healing, then maybe that feels a little bit better than if like, okay, I shot out my heal and he dodged out of the way of the rocket or whatever, like a healing rocket. I don't know.
Or imagine if it was something like napalm or some kind of fire. So you shoot the bad guy, it's doing damage, it's ticking on him, right, like a dot. But it's also a heal over time. So as you sit there and you hit them, they're burning in flames. They start running around doing whatever kind of crazy animation. And as they get closer to friendlies, it starts healing them. So That would be that. Talk about the world of crazy. You're in the whole room of crazy with my big theory crafting helmet right now. Troy and David and Michael, they're all sitting there writing all this stuff down, going, "Oh, this is some good stuff."
Well, let's switch gears real quick, just because it's crazy what they're doing with abilities. Because there's been rumors about this before, in one way or another, about abilities are going to be able to be advanced through paths. Now, maybe this isn't really kind of an important in combat, but I think it's interesting to see how they could address making abilities change and evolve based on what way you chose. We again, I don't want to go too much down the World of Warcraft route, but I think we saw them do this kind of with talents, where they made classes distinct based on their own personal choices. And I think that it's an interesting way to take it one step farther and address abilities where, Farin, we were talking about, a warrior spinning his sword around. And I think it could be very interesting for you. You've leveled up maybe the damage of it, and it does more damage, but goes for a shorter duration. Or I've increased the duration and increased my speed along the way. Like, these are just examples. I don't even know if these are going to be in the game, but I think it's an interesting way to allow character customization one step farther that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, so we're talking about the ability tiering system that they mentioned in the interview. Basically, like, you can choose certain abilities to be upgraded to have some sort of newer effects or maybe more damage, or somehow upgrading those abilities. One thing that I had as a concern about this system was that with the limited action set, it sounds pretty cool. Just I want to say that first. It sounds awesome. Like, the ability to actually be able to choose which abilities you want to improve is something that I think was maybe a little bit lacking before. Like, the ability to actually feel like you have some choice in which abilities are stronger, but you already have choice in which abilities to go on your action bar. So I hope that it's not the case that, okay, you have 8 things on your action bar, and so I want to have ability tier points in those 8 things, kind of thing. And then, like, I feel like I can't switch them out and so forth. Like, hopefully it's something where, like, you're really focusing on a couple abilities that are on your action bar, and you have some other ones that you feel you can hot swap in and out. Otherwise, I feel like the two systems might start to compete against one another, if that makes any sense.
And this system, actually, we had a quote from Carbine that said, "One system is ability tiering, and the goal behind it is to allow players to choose and upgrade their abilities. As you level up, you're going to get what we call ability tier points, and you're going to be able to spend those on abilities to upgrade them. And that's how you can make your abilities more powerful or gain additional functionality out of those abilities." So, I kind of hope that, like I said in my whirlwind storm, or my warrior spinning sword example, I hope that there's more than one option here. I hope that it's not just, I'm going to dump my points into whirlwind to make it stronger. I hope that there's almost like a branching path there where you can choose how you want to grow your whirlwind, because that would make, I think it would make a very dynamic growth system and customization for every class.
So are you suggesting, and again, just think about this, let's say we'll use Whirlwind as the example, you might be able to spec out that specific attack, whereas, you can either increase the duration of, while you're spinning around slicing, or you could just maybe increase the damage of it 1 tick or however many ticks per revolution. So you might only spin 3 times, but you did 1,000 points of damage versus spin for, 10 seconds and do maybe 7 or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at with the difference of the two paths.
Now would that be, I guess, to take it one step further, and not to belay the point, but would that run into the min-max problem? So, for example, after the game's been out for probably 5-6 months or 5-6 days, depending on who you're talking to. I'm gonna be like, okay, sorry, tank, you can't make it to this raid because your whirlwind is spec'd for duration instead of
But that's
burst.
always there's always going to be the maximum spec, always, period. No matter how diverse you try and create your system, there will always be the way your character has to be spec'd to the elite. Yes, that's unavoidable. But I think that giving that option to players and letting people who don't want to play at that min-max level opens up a lot of diverse entertainment and fun and choice of to how you want to play your character. Like I said, I mean, the other thing is like with the whirlwind, it's like, okay, well, we'll make it so that you can increase your speed when you're whirlwinding. Some players might choose to take that as an escape. You know, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm going to use this whirlwind to get away from someone real fast because it makes me faster. Again, these are all theoretical, but it's just I think that it allows a dynamic openness to the game that a lot of people enjoy.
Having that capability, though, really adds a lot to the game in general, especially for the life or the length of time that the game could still be relevant. And what I mean is the min-maxers, again, theory crafting all over the place. There might be a special way to spec out to be elite right now, but you know as well as I do, they tweak, or a lot of times they will tweak raids or they'll tweak boss mechanics over time. So maybe the way to min-max or the way to be ideal for the boss fight, for the first year or the first 6 months is to go for the speed. But depending on the way they change the mechanics in the boss fight within a year or two, having that ability to change the way you're spec might actually end up solving the problem for that doesn't exist now, but later down the road. So because they built in that capability within the system and giving you the flexibility, it allows your tunes, your classes to adjust to the different mechanics. So there's really a whole lot there that's really a great option for you that you might not see the benefit immediately other than just the fun or the desire for individuality. It might actually be a great MacGyver to how to try to figure out a boss mechanic down the road.
The second quote that they actually came out with was about their second system, and they said it's called AMP, Advanced Modification Protocols, and that is going to be our version of WildStar's take on the talent tree. Essentially, it's going to be a little bit different. Imagine a constellation like a star constellation map, and you're going to start in the center and work your way around as you gain and spend points. So I'm going to pull this up real quick for you guys. I think I know exactly what they're going for here. Does that look about right? Oh, you can't really tell what it is. Here, let me scoot this over. It's got a big Final Fantasy X at the top of it. It's a sphere. It's a sphere grid system. Is what it sounds like.
I really hope not, because there was like this article that came out a while back that somebody untangled the Final Fantasy X sphere grid, and it's actually super linear. There's almost no choices that you can make whatsoever, but it just looks like it's like, oh, it's going all over the place, but it's actually just like, oh, linear path here, linear path here, linear path
I don't know.
Here, like,
I mean,
here's no breaks.
Here's the thing I will say to refute that a little bit. Is there a linear path on the way that you are supposed to go? Absolutely. But I can tell you from experience, I did not know how to handle that system when I first started playing, and I unlocked it the completely wrong direction and ended up having I think it was Titus completely.
The key things, you get them so rarely, and you don't get them for quite a while. So for a long time, you're going like in a straight line. And some of the class, this is getting way off topic, but basically, like the way that it's designed is to make you feel like you have a lot of choice, but you actually don't have that much, unless you're playing like the international expert mode or whatever.
Right.
The illusion of choice.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean, here's the thing: they were pretty vague about talent trees for a long time, and I guess this is why, because obviously, as you guys are even kind of saying, you're worried about the illusion of choice, and if these talent trees are really going to be affecting. But here's my question with it though. They have so many, especially with these ability upgrade systems, if they go in the direction that we kind of just talked about. Do we need another level of choice talent systems on there that really drastically change it? Or does it become, at some point, information overload?
So this was coming from, I think the system came from, according to the State of the Beta post that Mike Donatelli gave back in August. Basically, they were getting feedback that it felt like players didn't feel like they actually had very much customization. They didn't feel like they had very much choice in there. And so they went back and they were like, okay, this is something that we want to work on. These are some new systems that we're going to add. And so this is the first little bit that we're starting to actually get of those specific system, like specifics on it. Hopefully we'll learn a lot more very soon. But I mean, it all sounds great, but the proof will be in the pudding exactly how much customization will go to. And the idea of you being like in the center and sort of working your way outward, I think it sounds cool, but I've played so many games that have tried something like this, and they just it doesn't actually end up feeling all that great because it's like, okay, you should go this route over here, and then like every other route is just like gimping yourself significantly, and so like it falls into the whole false choice or just like wrong choices more like instead of false choice.
So who are they trying to though make happy with that? Are they targeting the core? And I'm talking metrics and analytics. Are they talking about the core players, or is this a vocal minority? Because depending, again, like we kind of said it, pardon me, there's going to be a min-maxed route or a suggested build, right? You know, fan sites are going to make them. They're going to try to say, hey, you know, if you're going to, you know, raid or you go PvP, this is the PvP build or this is the raid build. They're going to come up with that.
I understand that, but
order. So I mean, I guess all I'm trying to say is like, what are these options or these illusions of choice really for? Are they for the casuals? Or are they just to check a block and say, hey, look, you can play how you want to play? With the reality of, you know, you really are kind of limited if you want to be a raider or a PvPer. I mean, because very few people, even though most people are going to, you know, level up to some degree and then probably drop off. I don't know what the percentages are, people who stay for end game and then stay for years. But who's that really for? Is that for the casuals, dare I say, or is that just to check a block to say that we're giving you some choice, but not really?
well, I think that this is a problem that comes up a lot with these kinds of talent systems. That okay, this is like, you know, who is this actually fun for? If there is like one correct route or like maybe two correct routes, depending on exactly like what fight you're on or whatever. And I think the problem is like, who is this actually enjoyable for? So, like, you know, 0.1%. So like probably like, so the 1% of the 1% are the people who are actually doing the calculations, writing the sims, and trying out all the different talent builds and figuring it out. And then you have the 1% that follows those to the T, and then you have like the other 99% that are going to mostly follow what those people say. So like, I'm one of those players that would actually like I have done for myself, like I have written like a simulation to try to figure out is this talent build better than that talent build. So I'm probably pretty high up in there, and I find it enjoyable. Like I like that kind of thing. I like trying to figure out which one's a little bit better, but I don't think that it's fun for most players to have to just like say, okay, this is exactly it. That's what I mean by wrong choice. Like, because if they aren't doing that, then they're not being quite as optimal. And I mean, maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but I don't find it very fun to have to just follow someone else's build. Because like, okay, maybe they did the math before me. I feel like that takes away from me because I like doing the math in the first place. But then, like, even if I didn't care about doing the math, which I didn't always, it was just like, okay, that's what I got to do. Then I feel like I got to do it, and then I feel like like that choice isn't even in the game anymore for me.
I see your point, but I am inevitably that guy who builds the wrong build. You know, you know what I mean? I'm like, I look at the name, I try to figure out what the animation is. I try in my head to min-max, but I never get down into Excel or whatever and build out a min-max table. I'm just like, well, from looking at it, it looked like I kicked this one rat's butt really well. So yeah, I'm going with that. I'm putting that one on my toolbar, and then I get to end game, and then I'm like, why am I sucking in PvP or raiding or whatever? And then I go and I go to a fan site. I go to, you know, Zam or whatever, and or wildstarfans.net, and then I'm like, I'm gimped. I've been gimped for 7 levels, and I wonder why I suck. You know, it's so bad. And then I inevitably go in there and I fix my build, and I'm like, yep, that's pretty good. I might tweak it a little bit after that, you know, just for philosophical differences relative to the way I play. Like, so for example, I never go with the rotations that they always offer, because I just don't. But at least I get my build right so that I can be survivable. So I don't know, I guess is the answer, right?
The reason why I bring this up and that I'm talking about is I know that this is a thing that happens in most MMOs, right? This isn't a new thing that, okay, like this fight over, okay, who should we build for? Should we have these choices that aren't really like major choices that everyone's going to follow other people? And the reason why I bring it up is because in WildStar, you know, I don't remember which developer, but they mentioned that they don't like guides. And what I mean by this is they like the idea of having strategy guides, strategies for WildStar, but they don't like guides. So that's why they have randomization in puzzles, like for the path puzzles. That's why they have randomization in their dungeons and in their raids. They don't want people to just follow a guide and do exactly what someone else has told them to do. They want them to have some sort of experience of figuring out this is what's best for me, this is what's best for our group. And so that's why I think that they would be well served in staying away from that if they're going to follow through with that philosophy throughout the rest of the game. So that's just what I want to get to. We probably should move on though.
Real quick, before we move on, I just want to tell you guys about another sponsor of ours called Audible. Now, Audible is a great service that if you guys are busy like I am, I cannot tell you how much work goes into doing everything. Everyone over at Gamebreaker is extremely busy, but me, I just cannot find the time to read books like I used to, if at all anymore. And that's why Audible is such a great service for people like myself who are just too busy, but still maybe want to catch up on some great reading while they're on the move. So Audible is a audiobook service that's offered through an Amazon company, and they have hundreds of thousands of hours of books that you can listen to on the go. You can download it to your Android or iPhone, as well as just listen to them on the go at your computer. So while you're sitting there listening to, or while you're sitting there raiding, or maybe you're working on dailies, questing, whatever you're doing, if you have some free time, just turn on an audiobook. And for example, right now, the big movie that's coming out shortly is Ender's Game. And that's obviously, you always get those skeptics that say the book is better than the movie. So why not catch yourself up to date so that you can truly find out if the book is better than the movie? It's going to take you a little bit longer than the movie. It'll take you about 12 hours to complete. But hey, you get the full book experience in just 12 hours by signing up for Audible right now. So head on over to audible.com/Gamebreaker. And we're going to hook you up with a free 30-day trial as well as a free audiobook so you guys can check out Ender's Game or one of the many books that they have available on audible.com. So check it out, audible.com/Gamebreaker. Now, real quick, we got to wrap this show up, so I just want to be as fast as we can on this topic. That we did get one tweet that kind of teased us a little bit yesterday, and that tweet was, if you want a head start on this week's topic of discussion, I recommend you reread August's State of the Beta, and a link. So before people get excited, it's not obviously going to be going into open beta, come play our game for 6 months and then get burned out before release. It's not going to be that. But if we look back to the State of the Beta post that they're specifically pointing to, a big part of it kind of talks about the lack of choice in player progression. So we've talked about talent trees. We've talked about ability tiers and path abilities. Do you guys think we're going to get any other, real details on the subject matter here?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for them to tease it as much if they weren't ready to just start getting in there. And I think that this is the time where they really need to get going. They need to start, approaching these details and sort of fleshing out these systems, because that's what's going to start to get people excited. When you can start out with some of these systems and get the hardcore excited, and they're going to start talking to their friends, and then you start putting in some of the other systems. You start talking more about housing, you start talking more about other social systems and other things, then you start getting the other players excited, and then you just build this way up until the launch. So I think this is a great move there. Hopefully this Wednesday it'll be exciting. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's also if not just what Farhan said, I think it's also kind of code for, okay, guys, a lot more beta invites are going to go out. So more people will be getting, in my opinion, more people will be getting the opportunity to get into beta and play and try to move the ball forward in terms of where they want to see the progression has gone relative to, how they decide to kind of change their questing system, but also test out some of their in-game things. I was basically told as much by one of the Carbine developers at PAX East that they're not going to probably do a regular open beta, kind of just like we're kind of saying, in terms of just play it and see it and graze and then leave. I think they're going to continue to probably do targeted, focused events to try to test out systems. However, I think they're going to ramp up the numbers. I think they're going to start getting people in. And what I think you're also probably going to see is you're probably not going to see the same folks continuing over and over and over. I think what they're probably going to do is they're going to bring in really large numbers and then set them out and then bring in another group of large numbers and then kind of maybe rotate them in and out.
Mark Taylor, you can follow him right down there at Guild Umbra. Be sure to check him out. You can catch him here every week. Mark, you got anything else going on?
Just trying to see what's going on with the politics of the nation right now and stay employed.
Hey, we're talking about happy things, video games. No politics here. Politic-free zone. Farhan Siddiqui, you can follow him right down there at Unindel. Hopefully not affected by the shutdown of the government as much as Mark might have been.
Probably not quite as much soon.
Be sure to catch him here every week as well. You guys can follow me right down here at Mike Shavnit. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys are excited about WildStar and you haven't watched the show live, you guys should come check it out. We do it live here on Gamebreaker TV every week, so please, please, please come check it out. Tell your friends about it, show everyone, and share some love. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.